At first glance, you'd think the strongest man alive is the one with the biggest biceps on Instagram. The one with the supplement sponsors and the perfect lighting. You'd be wrong. Dead wrong. Before steroids. Before protein powders. Before chiropractors even existed, there was a breed of men who lifted anchors, horses, and even buildings with their bare hands. They didn't have personal trainers. They didn't have recovery protocols. They had desperation and bone-crushing willpower. But here is the terrifying secret that history books buried: most of their records are still standing. Today, we aren't just listing names. We are digging up the ghosts of the Iron Age. These are the strongest men in history you won't believe existed. And number 1, died carrying a secret inside his chest that doctors still can't explain, over 100 years later. Stay with this. Because the next part changes everything. Let's start with the mystery of size. In the early 1800s, a Scottish immigrant named Angus McCaskill arrived in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. He wasn't just tall. He was a biological impossibility. Standing 7 feet 9 inches, he wasn't lanky like modern basketball players. He was a brick wall. He weighed 425 pounds. His shoulders measured 44 inches wide. His hands were so large that a grown man's fist could fit inside his palm like a child's toy. But here is where the story breaks reality. Witnesses swore McCaskill once lifted a ship's anchor weighing nearly 700 pounds onto his shoulder and walked down a wharf like it was a grocery bag. Think about that. That is the weight of a small car balanced on one shoulder blade. He reportedly could carry a 40-foot mast under his arm like a walking stick. Yet, despite this superhuman strength, McCaskill never won a single official competition. Why? Because he was too gentle. The hidden truth? Locals whispered he refused to fight or show off. He once lifted a dory boat with 6 drunk sailors inside it, and instead of throwing them into the water to teach them a lesson, he gently set the boat on the wharf and walked away smiling. He met Queen Victoria. She gave him gold rings. He died at just 38 years old from a brain fever. But the people of Cape Breton never forgot. They built a museum in his honor. And that's where things get strange. Because what came next, no one expected. Most people have heard of Louis Cyr. But most people don't believe the numbers. In 1895, in Boston, Massachusetts, Cyr performed the single greatest backlift in human history. He put a platform holding 18 grown men on his back. Then he lifted it. The total weight? 337 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's like lifting a rhinoceros. Or 2 small cars. Or 18 angry men trying to push you into the ground. Louis Cyr was only 5 feet 8 inches tall. He looked like a fire hydrant made of granite. His thighs measured 28 inches around, larger than most men's waists. His chest expanded to 60 inches. But his greatest trick wasn't the backlift. It was the finger lift. He once raised 534 pounds off the ground using just one finger. Let me repeat that. Half a ton. One finger. No straps. No grip aids. Just flesh, bone, and tendon. The emotional tension here is tragedy. Cyr was undefeated his entire career. He was called the Canadian Samson. Promoters offered him fortunes to travel the world. But his body was too dense for his heart. He died at just 49 years old. The autopsy revealed his muscles were so thick and fibrous that medical examiners reportedly struggled to cut through them. They had never seen anything like it. But there is a twist that most people miss. Cyr's records are considered incontestable because modern strongmen refuse to even attempt them. The risk of spinal explosion is too high. So the man who lifted a rhino remains the king. You might think Eugen Sandow, the father of bodybuilding, was the king of the 19th century strongmen. He wasn't. Not even close. The real king was a German-born circus performer named Arthur Saxon. And this is where the story takes a dark, jealous turn. In 1898, Saxon performed a move called the bent press. He lifted 371 pounds overhead with one arm. This isn't a jerky deadlift. This is controlled, raw, terrifying power. He would take the barbell, rest it on his shoulder, then lean his entire body to one side while straightening his arm. The leverage was inhuman. When Eugen Sandow saw this, he was furious with jealousy. Sandow was the celebrity. Sandow had the perfect physique. But Saxon had the actual strength. So Sandow did something desperate. He sued Saxon. He claimed the lift was fake. He tried to have the record erased from history forever. Most people missed this detail. Sandow lost the court case. The judges looked at the evidence, the witnesses, the physics, and they ruled that Arthur Saxon was exactly as strong as he claimed. But Sandow had better publicists. He had the magazines. He had the fans. Saxon died poor and sick in 1921, his lungs destroyed by pneumonia after serving in World War I. The unanswered question haunts strongman history to this day: how many of Saxon's records has no one beaten, not because they can't, but because the bent press is physically too dangerous to even attempt with modern safety standards. We skip ahead a few decades to Vancouver, Canada. Meet Doug Hepburn. At first glance, everything looked perfect. Broad shoulders. Thick neck. The physique of a god. But then, you notice the limp. Hepburn was born with a club foot. He also had crossed eyes. The doctors told his mother he would be weak. They said he would never be athletic. They said he should prepare for a quiet, limited life. Doug Hepburn responded by becoming the first man in history to bench press 500 pounds raw. No machines. No bench shirts. No synthetic suits. Just flesh, bone, and an undiagnosed fury at everyone who doubted him. In 1953, he was named the world's strongest man. But the tragedy here is the silence. Despite lifting weights that would crush modern professional athletes, he once curled 260 pounds on a barbell, a feat most bodybuilders today can't even cheat on. Hepburn was forgotten. Why? Because he refused to pose pretty for the cameras. He refused to shave his chest. He refused to play the game. He died in the year 2000, largely ignored by the fitness industry he helped create. There is no statue of Doug Hepburn. No brand named after him. Just a dusty footnote in the record books. But the men who lifted with him? They never forgot. They said his grip felt like iron cables closing around your hand. We can't talk about strength without talking about pain tolerance. In the gritty factories and coal mines of the Industrial Revolution, men were forged from a different kind of steel. There were hundreds of nameless strongmen. But one name stands out as a ghost: Eugen Sandow. Wait. Let's rewind. Before he was a celebrity with marble statues of himself, Sandow was a science experiment. In the 1890s, he was measured by a machine called a dynamometer at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. He pulled against it with a force of over 200 pounds. Doctors at the time were baffled. They believed his strength came not just from muscle size, but from nerve control. Sandow could flex individual muscles independently, a rare neurological gift. But here is the hidden truth that history sanitizes: Sandow's rise led directly to the modern fitness industry. He sold dumbbells. He published magazines. He created the first fitness influencers. And the irony? He hated the heavy lifting we just talked about. Sandow preferred aesthetics over absolute strength. He once said that lifting massive weights was brutish and ugly. He wanted muscles that looked good under gaslight, not muscles that could lift a horse. Which brings us to the man on our list who had no aesthetics. Only destruction. Let's return to Arthur Saxon for a moment. Because his specific feat requires an escalation of stakes. Saxon's two hands anyhow lift, a terrifying combination of a clean, a press, and a squat, totaled 448 pounds. To perform this lift, you have to be flexible, explosive, and immovable all at the same time. You start with the barbell on the floor. You pull it to your shoulder. Then you sit down while pressing it overhead. Then you stand up with the weight already locked out. It looks like a seizure. It feels like a dislocation. There is a reason you don't see this lift in the Olympics anymore. The International Olympic Committee actually removed these one-arm and anyhow lifts in the 1920s because the risk of dropping the bar on your head was too high. Athletes were dying in competition. But here is the micro-reveal that will stick with you. Saxon used to train by lifting his brothers. His brothers weighed over 200 pounds each. He would grab one by the belt and press him overhead with one arm. Then he would walk around the room. Today, we have safety racks, spotters, and insurance policies. They had wool suits, handlebar mustaches, and zero fear of death. And they won. Remember Louis Cyr? Before he was a showman, before the rhinoceros lifting and the finger feats, he was a police officer in Montreal. This is the 1880s. Montreal is a rough port city. Fights break out constantly. Knives are common. Guns are expensive. Cyr didn't carry a gun. He didn't need one. The legend says he once broke up a knife fight between two drunk sailors by simply picking up both combatants, one under each arm, and carrying them to jail. They couldn't move. They couldn't struggle. They just dangled there, feet off the ground, like children being carried to bed. But here is the escalation you didn't expect. Cyr famously resisted the pull of 4 draft horses. Picture this: he stands in the middle of a dirt street. Ropes are tied around his waist. Behind him, 4 massive Clydesdale horses, each weighing nearly a ton, are hitched to the ropes. Whips crack. Men shout. The horses lunge forward with everything they have. They cannot move him 1 inch. Think about the physics. A single draft horse can pull about 8,000 pounds. 4 horses have the potential to pull 32,000 pounds. Did Cyr actually stop 32,000 pounds? No, friction and ground conditions matter. But the visual alone, a single man anchoring himself against 4 terrified, straining horses, cemented him as a demigod in the public imagination. He is the only man on this list who has a park and a high school named after him in Montreal. That's how you know the respect was real. That's how you know the people who saw him never forgot. We return to Angus MacAskill for the resolution of his story. Unlike the others who died broke, addicted, or forgotten, MacAskill did something remarkable. He made a snug fortune. He bought farms. He bought a grist mill. He bought a general store. He invested his strength money wisely and lived like a king in his small corner of the world. But the most haunting detail about MacAskill isn't his wealth. It's his humanity. There is a verified story that a group of drunk sailors once bet him he couldn't lift a heavy dory boat. The boat weighed several hundred pounds. The sailors were inside it, laughing. MacAskill walked over, grabbed the gunwales, and lifted the entire boat with the sailors inside off the water. Then he walked to the wharf and gently set it down. He didn't tip them out. He didn't shake them. He didn't teach them a lesson. He just smiled, collected his bet money, and walked away. He had the strength to tear a man in half with his bare hands. But the personality of a teddy bear. He met Queen Victoria, who gave him gold rings and reportedly asked to touch his biceps. He died peacefully in his own bed. In the world of strongmen, a peaceful death is the rarest trophy of all. We have to address the elephant in the room, Eugen Sandow. Why is he on a list of strongest when he was more about looking strong? Because Sandow performed a feat that required a different kind of mental strength, the backlift. While Cyr lifted 4,300 pounds, Sandow lifted a platform holding 3 horses and a piano. Eyewitness accounts place the weight around 3,500 pounds. Not quite Cyr territory, but still bone-shattering. But Sandow's real power was his grip. He could hold a 200-pound dumbbell at arm's length for minutes at a time. He could tear a deck of playing cards in half. He could bend iron bars into pretzels using only his hands. The ultimate reveal: in 1911, Sandow was walking along the Thames River in London when he saw a man drowning. The current was strong. The man was heavy. Bystanders were frozen in fear. Sandow stripped off his jacket, dove in, swam against the current, grabbed the drowning man, and pulled him to shore. His strength didn't just win medals. It didn't just sell magazines. It saved a life. We need to talk about John Bud Rogan. Because his story is both inspiring and heartbreaking. Rogan was born in 1868 in Tennessee. He grew and grew and grew. By the time he reached adulthood, he was 8 feet 9 inches tall, still the tallest African American man in recorded history. He weighed over 350 pounds. But here is the tragedy: Rogan couldn't stand. His legs were too weak to support his massive frame. He spent most of his life sitting or lying down. And yet, despite this limitation, he was incredibly strong. His arms were so long and powerful that he could lift grown men with one hand from a seated position. He once picked up a 200-pound anchor and threw it across a room like a toy. He made his living by displaying himself in circuses, sitting in a specially built chair, lifting heavy objects to amaze crowds. But the hidden truth? Rogan died at just 37 years old from complications of gigantism. His body simply couldn't keep up with his growth. An autopsy revealed that his heart was enormous, but it failed anyway. He asked to be buried in a grave deep enough that grave robbers couldn't steal his body for medical research. That's the level of paranoia these men lived with. Russia has produced some terrifying strongmen. But none were scarier than George Hackenschmidt. Hackenschmidt was a wrestler and weightlifter who competed in the early 1900s. He was known for two things: his incredible strength and his bizarre diet. He ate almost nothing but raw meat and raw eggs. He believed that cooking destroyed the vital force of food. Doctors at the time called him a savage. He called them weak. Hackenschmidt once performed a stiff-legged deadlift of 585 pounds, a feat that would snap most modern hamstrings. He could squat 400 pounds for reps while holding a conversation. He once wrestled a bear in a circus show and won. The bear, reportedly, was not happy. But the tragedy of Hackenschmidt is that he became a philosopher in his old age. He wrote books about health, strength, and the mind-body connection. He died at 90 years old, one of the longest-lived strongmen on this list. So maybe the raw meat diet wasn't so crazy after all. We close our list with a man who had every reason to be weak. His name was John L. Sullivan Jr., no relation to the boxer. Sullivan lost his left arm in a childhood accident. Doctors said he would be an invalid. They said he would never work a normal job. They said he should accept a life of dependency. Sullivan became one of the strongest one-armed men in history. He could deadlift over 500 pounds with one hand. He could press 250 pounds overhead with his single arm. He performed in vaudeville shows, lifting cannonballs and bending iron bars, using only his right arm and his teeth. Audiences gasped. Children stared. Strongmen of the era respected him as an equal. But the hidden truth is that Sullivan never made much money. The novelty of the one-armed strongman wore off quickly. He died in obscurity in the 1920s, his grave unmarked for decades until strength historians found it. He proved that strength isn't about having two arms. It's about having one will. So, who is the strongest? If you put them all in a room together, if time travel was real and you could watch them compete, who would walk out the champion? McCaskill had the raw, structural size and the gentle heart. Saxon had the technical one-arm genius and the jealous rivals. Sear had the absolute, crushing back strength and the early death. Hepburn had the raw barbell numbers and the club foot. Hackenschmidt had the raw meat diet and the 90-year lifespan. Rogan had the tragic height and the seated power. Sandow had the perfect physique and the drowning rescue. But the secret that history hides is this: they are all tied. Because we don't compare them by pounds lifted. We compare them by spirit. These men lived in an era where there were no safety bars, no spotters, no insurance policies, no air conditioning, no protein shakes, no steroids, no orthopedic surgeons waiting to fix their torn ligaments. If you failed a lift in 1895, you didn't just drop a barbell. You dropped a horse on your chest. You dropped a platform full of men on your spine. You died in front of a paying audience, and the show went on without you. That's why you won't believe they existed. Because in our air-conditioned gyms with our rubberized weights and our carefully curated Spotify playlists and our post-workout protein smoothies, we have lost the fear of the load. We have lost the desperation. We have lost the knowledge that strength isn't just about looking good in a tank top. Strength is about survival. But here is the question I leave with you. If Angus MacAskill could lift an anchor with a smile, if Doug Hepburn could bench press 500 pounds with a club foot, if a one-armed man could deadlift half a ton. What are you capable of when you stop making excuses? Because the strongest muscle in the human body isn't in the legs. It isn't in the back. It isn't even in the heart. It's between your ears. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In the next video, we reveal the weakest man in history who somehow defeated 3 of these giants in a fight. You won't believe how he did it. And you won't want to miss it. See you on the other side.